تشيخو جاب لهم
الدولار لما نستشهد
Captagon.
סמי מרץ.
نقترب من السلك الزاهر.
غيرنا يا اخوان غيرنا.
فيديوهات ايش؟ هاي في الجبات.
Good evening, guys. Today, in light of a special episode dedicated to a delicate issue, we will be more serious out of respect. In fact, today we're covering October 7th, meaning the appalling, grotesque, and inhumane terror act committed by Hamas on Israel.
Let us be clear, such an act of barbarism is condemned by all three members of today's episode. Yes, you're right, I said three, because today we'll be joined by the boss of our network, Gaia Sabellico.
Hi guys, thank you for having me. Can't wait to have this conversation with you.
The pleasure is ours, and without further ado, time to debate.
So guys, just to recap for those who are not very well informed about the events, basically on October the 7th, there has been an attack which resulted from Hamas to Israel, which resulted in approximately more than 1,000 fatalities, including around 700 Israeli civilians, 373 security personnel, and 71 foreign nationals. This marks the deadliest single day for Israel since its establishment in 1948. The assault involved a coordinated barrage of over 5,000 rockets, followed by ground incursions by Hamas militants into civilian areas in Israel. Reports also indicate indiscriminate killings, rape, burning in streets, homes, and at gatherings like the Supernova Music Festival, where almost 400 individuals were killed.
Yeah, and 250 individuals were abducted during the attack, and this is a focal point because throughout the history of this war, this ongoing war, the civilians that were abducted are and will be and were a very important factor, and they are sort of leveraged by Hamas. As of recent updates, around 132 hostages remain with the Hamas, while some have been released during temporary truces, but those truces were very temporary. Overall, the war, for who does not understand it, is more deep-rooted in the culture between Israel and Palestine, and this started in 1948 with the UN, with the partition of Israel, with the UK, France. There's a whole history lesson which we could go into, but for time's sake, we won't. Just know that overall, there were historical grievances between Israel and Hamas. There were tensions in the region, and overall, Israel has used its military to repress the territory of Palestine, while Palestinians, or should be more precise, the Palestinians who support Hamas and Hamas itself have operated against Israel, even committing acts of terror. And if Gaia, you don't have anything to add on this background or anything you want to point out specifically, we can move on.
Nothing, you covered it all.
Perfect.
Right, so I would like to go straight with a question to you, Gaia. Could the attack of the October the 7th have been prevented?
Well, Ale, it's difficult to take a strict position on this matter because right after the attack, several newspaper, if I'm not mistaken, it was the BBC, they announced that the U.S. intelligence through Egypt, they did inform the Israeli intelligence about the upcoming attack, but as well, Netanyahu said that this news was absolutely false. So I don't know. It's a little strong position to say that they knew about it, but it is a possibility, and so is otherwise. So I don't know. Probably it could have been, but I wouldn't say no. Also, something we could add is that the Israeli intelligence is known for being one of the most efficient in the world. But so as well, something could have slipped out. So I wouldn't say a radical no, but it is a possibility that, yes, they could have prevented it.
What about you, Ale? Do you think it was orchestrated? Do you think, do you give in into the conspiracy theories?
I mean, I think it was half and half. So I partly I think they could not prevent it completely since I've watched. I think it was a documentary from BBC or more YouTube channel. I don't remember right now, where they explained all the tactics Hamas used to prevent we can say a preemptive response from Israel. So like blocking all the cameras, doing some noise and damages at the border, at the frontier. So I think they could not really preemptively respond to that. But on the other hand, I also think that actually they knew it after, especially these like damages Hamas had done, and I think they could actually prevent it. I'm a little bit in a conspiracy theory here, but I actually think that they did not want to stop it exactly because they wanted to react.
Right. I think I agree with both of you guys actually, and this is probably the last time we will all agree. But on one hand, you have Netanyahu, who is having problems with his government, judicial aspects too are surfacing again with his legitimacy. So it could well be that he needed a way to get out of it, and what's best than blaming it on the Palestinians. I also think that either case, it's horrible, and either case, there has something to go on in terms of review. Because if they didn't know and it slipped through, then how can that happen when you have literally one of the best, if not the best, intelligence agency in the world? If it was intentional, then that's even worse. So in either case, I think or someone has to pay for it. Let me give just three important dates, not in terms of the background, but in terms of the actual war that is going on. October 7th, as we said, is when it started, and Hamas launches Operation Al-Aqsa Flood, attacking Israel and taking over 250 hostages. October 8th, you have Israel starting the airstrikes on Gaza in retaliation. Around 300,000 reservists are mobilized. And then some time passes, people die. And in January 2024, after bombings, ground interventions, overall escalations, also under the pressure of the United States, Israel announces a withdrawal of troops from the Gaza Strip, reportedly reducing its military presence by 90%, leaving only one brigade in the area. Only is proportional, but yeah. Prime Minister Netanyahu insists that operations in Rafah are necessary to eradicate Hamas completely.
Yeah, and just let me add three other like milestones in this unfortunate war. So February 2024, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza escalates. There are reports indicating that over 40,000 Palestinians have died due to the conflict between the two parties. The blockade has led to severe shortages of food, water, medical supplies, and the UN agencies were warning of impending famine conditions. Then the month later, March 2024, military operations by the IDF continued, focusing on southern Gaza, particularly in Khan Yunis and Rafah. We all remember the images from Rafah, which continued also during the following months. And coming to the most recent one, September 28th, 2024, continued military operations were reported with recent advancements noted in the Gaza Strip with ongoing engagements against Hamas.
Right. So let me ask a question to both of you, and then I'll also give my opinion. The question is this one. What is a proportional response to the second largest terrorist attack ever behind 9/11? And if you have a solution in relation to this question, please go ahead and say it, Gaia.
Well, that's a very interesting question, very on point. Um, I don't have a precise answer to that. I do still believe that the answer is totally disproportionate, and it has been since probably the first week of the war. Because yes, the attack was very brutal, but again, and we see it in terms of casualties, and we see in terms of how many Palestinians are dead, rather, and instead, on the other hand, how many Israelis are dead. That's a very tricky issue. From my standpoint, we're in 2024. The international community has experienced two world wars, so many atrocities and the war on terror. And that in particular should have taught us that you cannot fight terrorism. I mean, not in this conventional way. And the fact is that a way to fight terrorism hasn't been discovered yet. And I'm no one to give a response to that. I'm still someone who believes that you cannot negotiate with terrorists because in a negotiating table you should have some common values to build something upon. And there's a total absence of that in this question in a sort of democracy against a terrorist group. I cannot give you an assessment of what a proportional response could be. I'm under the impression that this is way too disproportionate in the moment in the exact moment hospitals and schools get destroyed under bombs. This is awful, and I think that it's way too much.
So just to be clear, and like this, I can understand you better. You're saying that you're not clear on how a proportionate response would be. However, what's clear to you is that it's definitely not Israel, what Israel is doing right now.
Yeah, I think I don't have the instruments to say at what point they should have stopped. Um, but this is definitely too much.
Okay. Ale, what about you? Do you agree with her?
Not really. I mean, I feel like the reaction of Israel is proportionate. But first, let me do a premise. I'm totally against, as I said in introduction, against any killing of innocent civilians, against damages at schools, universities, hospitals, whatever. But I do believe that the actual response from Israel is proportionate, all things equal, meaning with the specific conditions. And I would have said that for any other kind of war in the world with the same conditions this is happening. Meaning, as you know me, I'm a real security proponent, national security proponent. So I believe security is what matters the most for a state. And a state has to be protected in any way possible. So I believe the reaction of Israel is proportionate in the sense that they immediately reacted to a terrorist threat to punish them, to annihilate them. Well, after that, obviously, I agree with you that they are breaching the Geneva Convention, international law, because they are mismanaging their weapons, the use of them, what they are targeting, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, I cannot blame entirely Israel, since Hamas is using civilians as shields. They are having their headquarters in hospitals and schools. So I think Israel is right to be blamed for some aspects of how it is executing this war, this reaction, but not entirely. And I think the right answer, when they should have stopped, only when Hamas is totally annihilated. So until that, they should not stop. Obviously, they should try to avoid as much civilians as possible. They have to try to do whatever they can to avoid any civilian killing. It's difficult. Probably it's also impossible. There will be collateral damages. I know it's not a real word in international law referring to civilians. So this is my answer. What could be a good compromise? I don't know. Palestinians starting to rebel to Hamas, starting to having the willingness to have a real compromise, a real agreement with Israel, because history has shown that always Palestinians are the ones who refused the agreements with Israel. So the good compromise would be that, finding a two-state solution, as Israel has proposed many times, and Palestinians have refused as much as they received the offer.
Ali, I got a
Okay.
question for you.
Yeah.
You mentioned something about fighting terrorism, and you said yourself that it's a very tough task. I think my take on this, and I'm very a firm believer of that. And I get back to what I mentioned before, to the reason why before I mentioned the war on terror. And in this particular scenario, we have Hamas. We have, after Hamas, we also have Hezbollah that is 10 times bigger than Hamas. We have other, I don't know, several militias, around 10 militias, if I'm not mistaken, that are all Iranian militias. So I understand what you're saying, but actually in this scenario in particular, I don't see an end to this war if we follow this path. You want to destroy Hamas, don't you think that at some point Hezbollah will react? And at the end of this path is going to be Iran. That is really the father of the threat to the existential threat that Israel is claiming. So I don't see the point of that response and this war against terrorism.
Okay, so I see what you're saying. I understand that. About the Hezbollah, well, first of all, let's say that Hezbollah has answered multiple times, but at the end, they are the one who lost the most, probably even more than Hamas, since a graph the other day has shown after the killing of Nasrallah that basically just one leader, which was the third in line of succession, has remained alive among all the leaders of Hezbollah. So also Hezbollah now is in a very critical situation thanks to the Israeli weapons. While about Iran, yeah, I understand your point that probably the war will never end because Iran will continue to foment, to support other like factions, militias, which are Arabs, pro-Palestinians or Palestinians per se. And here is where I think the United States should play a way more crucial role, which for sure cannot be played under Biden's administration. And the United States should be respected more in international scenario, like they did under Trump, which when they were feared by Iran, and Iran stopped any kind of, we can say, harsh, strong, powerful activity against Israel. So I think the two things should be combined: Israel fighting Hamas and Hezbollah, the United States thinking about diplomacy, stick and carrot against Iran. I don't know. Also, Ale, what do you think?
So, first of all, if you keep killing disproportionate amount, actually, we will get into the ratios later, but let's just go with the premise. If you kill a lot of civilians, you're just gonna breed even more terrorists in the future because the young impressionable minds will turn violent, and so it's sort of a self-replicating cycle. I'm not sure what Israel is doing is the most efficient. With that said, I think it might not be proportional, and no one knows what proportional is. It's not like it's in the law, but it has, and by it I mean Israel, it has a duty to defend its citizens, seeing that for decades and decades, both Hamas and other terrorists have attacked. I think at a certain point, I don't remember the year, there were 50 bombings, one per week in Israel, and to defend a country is the utmost duty of a government. So yes, it's too much, but no one has the answer of what can be done in its place. Plus, just to touch very briefly on Hezbollah, right now to deal with Hezbollah means to also deal with Iran. And I am aware they basically decimated the entire leadership, and to replace that, it would be quite a challenge for Hezbollah. But opening another front when you still have to deal with Hamas, I think tactically is a very bad decision. So my take is militarily, they're doing mostly everything wrong. But in the grand scheme of security, I sort of agree with Israel. Not when they start bombing hospitals and innocents indiscriminately. Actually, since I touched on that with the ratio, Gaia, can you talk about a little bit the humanitarian aspect and impact of this war?
Of course. So I have some figures right here. According to the latest one, so far we have 41,500 Palestinians that have been killed, and it's of course difficult to assess the share of civilians and the share of Hamas fighters. But back in February, Israel declared that, well, at the time it was 30,000 casualties, and 10,000 of them were Hamas fighters. And if we want to believe that this information is truth, and if the war and the casualties have grown accordingly from February to September, so far we should have reached around 13,000. Of course, this is pure mathematics, but I mean the figures are are horrible. We have one terrorist to kill one terrorist. We have almost three civilians, around three civilians. So the figures are awful. And also, if we look at the total death toll, we have around 43,000 deaths and just 1,700 ish are Israeli, and the rest are all Palestinians, both civilians and Hamas fighters. And also, recently, a UN report has been published saying that 32% of the casualties are children.
Yeah, those figures are, if they're true, they're quite concerning. I have heard that, or at least one side of the equation in this debate says that you have to take these numbers with a grain of salt since they're coming from Hamas themselves, which are directly involved in the war, and they can be sort of over inflating these numbers. Obviously, even Israel does this. So I think an unbiased source after the war will truly tell us the numbers. Because I think the actual number was like around 25,000, but I'm not sure that's true. In any case, let's say if it's like even 25,000, that's 25,000 too much. With that said, I actually would like to do a little experiment here in terms of ratio because fighter civilian ratio is important in a war. And if we look at, for example, Iraq war, you had one fighter per 2.5 civilians killed. If you look at the Syrian civil war, approximately one fighter every five civilians. If you look at the Yemen civil war, you have one fighter per five civilians. So, and I believe right now the estimates uh, are around 1 to 2 slash 1 to 3. And obviously, Hamas instead says it's like the Yemen war, which means one fighter every five civilians. So if it's the case of the IDF claiming 1 to 2, then it's completely in line with modern warfare. If it's like Hamas claims, so again, one fighter every five civilians, it's not in line with modern warfare and it's more so towards the higher end of casualties. And it's mathematically speaking pretty standard. Morally speaking, it's still not the best they can do.
And I have a question I would like to hear your take on. Is Israel an apartheid state?
Okay, I'll, if it's okay, I go. So,
Yeah, yeah.
straightforward answer, no, totally not. It's a false myth. And I give you some facts. First of all, it is not an apartheid state because in Israel, the population is 20% made of Arabs. Arabs are represented at the government with their parties. There is an Arab judge in the Israeli Supreme Court. And I'd say maybe if we have to talk about apartheid, is the opposite since there are no Israeli and there has no been Israeli in the past in the Arab part of the territory. And second of all, Israel cannot be called an apartheid state or be accused to have expelled Arabs and so on and so forth. Simply because also in its funding documents, and I have it here so I can quote, they said in the very midst of the onslaught launched against us for months to the Arab inhabitants of the state of Israel. We invite them to preserve peace and to participate in the building of the state on the basis of full and equal citizen and representation in our institutions. So Israel has never meant to be an apartheid state. It has never been an apartheid state. It has always included the Arabs in their territory. And also considering Gaza, for example, they intentionally withdrew to leave it to the Palestinians, which then apparently decided to vote the wrong side. So my answer is no.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting.
Well, Ali, let me just push back a little bit very quickly, and I want a straight answer. Would you define an apartheid state who controls another state? Because we all know how Israel controls Gaza, and in terms of electricity, supplies, water. So how can it not be an apartheid state when it's literally controlling the essentials for life?
I mean, as long as I know, I may be wrong, I may be not well informed. It's controlling what is happening in Gaza right now in a situation of war. While before, as long as I know, they always left all the control to the party ruling Gaza as well as in the West Bank, so to Palestinians. Now I'm quite aware that now it's the opposite. Now Israel is controlling water, medical supply, and so on and so forth. It's an emergency situation. It can be kind of justified, not the way Israel is doing that. I mean, a general control, but not for sure the brutal control Israel is doing. But in the past, I think this did not happen.
So we could just say that in the past they did just control the territory as they advanced over the territory, over the Palestinian territory. But now it got worse because they also have control over services and stuff.
I mean, in the past, actually, they controlled the territory when there were like the wars because the Arabs always, as first, attacked Israel. Israel always defended itself, apart from one case, which I think was the 1967 war, if I'm not wrong. While in the other cases, the Arabs attacked, and so Israel took the control as a consequence of those wars. And as I said, in 2005, Israel unilaterally withdrew from Gaza. So in 2005, it stopped controlling the territory. It was all in the hands of the Palestinians. While according referring to now, to the present, they are controlling the territory. Yes, they are controlling the services. Yes. The way they're doing that is totally wrong. The fact that they're controlling it because it's an emergency situation, it's not wrong per se, at least for me.
Let me jump in. So yes, they went out of Gaza, but de facto they were still there, and they did control Gaza even before the war. I do understand, to give you some credit, Ale. They did also do that because of the, as I mentioned before, various terrorist attacks and threats that were sort of spread to different times of the year in different parts of Israel with the rockets that were launched. So I do understand why they want to keep that control, and they don't fully trust what is a de facto terrorist organization controlling Gaza. Let's move on to the future implications and prospects for the region. I sort of already answered, so I want to hear Gaia's point here. And I mentioned that by continuously attacking and using violence on Palestinians, especially the younger ones, we will breed new generations of terrorists who simply will hate Israel. What do you think, Gaia?
Well, if I were to make an assessment of future scenarios, believe me, I would not know where to begin. I think it could be anything. It could end up in Israel winning the war or in the total destruction of the country. Um, so far, I think Netanyahu is being very non-strategic and very unpredictable. And by those terms, I mean that after 1 year of war, I would have never expected the war to have expanded over the Palestinian territory. And and I don't think it's very, in strategic term, it's very clever to anger Iran by expanding the war, not only against Gaza, against Hamas, I'm sorry, but also against Hezbollah. And I don't see an happy ending to that, because if we take it as a truth that Israel is seeing this war as an existential war, uh, to provoke Iran is, which is the father of this potential existential threat, because it also has the means to destroy the entire territory of Israel. Of course, it isn't strategic. It is not a strategic move, to anger the beast. So I wouldn't. I'm totally surprised every day by how by the turn this war is taking, and I guess we'll see. We'll hope for the best, but I don't think the scenarios will be very happy.
Yeah, I agree on this last part, meaning that we hope for the best. I honestly, I'm not surprised about how Netanyahu reacted, what Israel is doing. I'm surprised by the, let me be honest, stupid tactics and strategies they are adopting, but I'm not surprised about the fact that they are reacting also in Israel, in Palestine, in Gaza, in Palestinian territory. I honestly expected, given the strength and the power of Israel, that in 1 or 2 days everything will be ended because Israel would have annihilated and destroyed everything, but apparently it did not happen. The future is very uncertain. Everything is unpredictable because of many factors. First of all, we do not know now how Iran is going to react to the killing of Hezbollah's leader. What is going to happen in Lebanon? We do not know what is going to happen after the United States elections in November, because everything can be changed also after them. If the war has to last until we don't know, maybe 2 3 years. We do not know what will happen in the next Israel elections, if Netanyahu will be confirmed or not. And lastly, and I conclude here, since I think for a matter of time it's better to go to the conclusions. I honestly do not agree that Iran is an existential threat to Israel. Is a threat, but not an existential. And I'm quite convinced that Iran has yet not the force to destroy Israel. Israel was still able to defend itself, and probably it's the contrary. Israel is still more powerful than Iran.
Before concluding, thank you for having been civil. At the end of the day, we all want the least amount of deaths and the most amount of peace possible in the region and in the world.
Gaia, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
Awesome. In the meantime, follow us on our social media, Instagram and LinkedIn, Network Studenti Sicurezza Italiani and SSI, on YouTube and on our podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music.